Faceless Crimes. The Purse in the Basement, April 28th, 1955. Berkeley, California. A 14-year-old girl named Stephanie Bryan leaves school, a punkle, and takes the shortcut she always takes through the parking lot of the Claremont Hotel. The same route she's walked 100 times before. She never makes it home. A massive search goes out. Volunteers, bloodhounds, police combing the hills of 2 counties. All they find is a single schoolbook lying in a field, as if it had been dropped and never picked back up. For nearly 3 months, nothing. And then the case breaks open in the last place anyone expected. Not a tip from a stranger, not a confession, but a woman cleaning out her own basement. This is Faceless Storyteller, and this is Faceless Crimes, the series where we look past the headlines and into the people's most disturbing cases, one story at a time. Today, the kidnapping and murder of Stephanie Bryan, the accounting student who became the prime suspect inside his own home, and the execution that turned into a race against the clock, one that the state of California won by 6 minutes. Stephanie Bryan was, by every account, an ordinary Bay Area teenager. 14 years old, a student at Berkeley's Anna Head School for Girls, the kind of kid who took the same shortcut home every single day, because it was 10 minutes faster than the main road. On April 28, 1955, she took that shortcut for the last time. The disappearance triggered one of the largest manhunts Northern California had ever seen. Search parties fanned out across the hills of Alameda and Contra Costa counties. Police worked every lead they had, and for months they had almost nothing to go on. Just a girl who vanished into thin air on a route she'd walked her whole life, and a single textbook left behind in a sentence, like a punctuation mark on a sentence nobody could finish. Then, on July 15th, 1955, the phone rang at a Berkeley police station. On the line was a woman named Georgia Abbott. She told police she'd been down in her basement looking for something unrelated entirely, and in the process, she'd found a few things that didn't belong to her. A purse and an identification Bryan Adibo, both belonging to Stephanie Bryan. Georgia Abbott lived in a modest house on San Jose Avenue in Alameda with her husband, Burton Abbott, and Burton's mother, Elsie. When detectives searched the property, they found more than just the purse. They pulled schoolbooks out of that basement, a pair of glasses, a brassiere, all of it belonging to a missing 14-year-old girl, all of it sitting quietly in the home of a family, with no apparent connection to her at all. Nobody in the house could explain it. Elsie Abbott admitted she'd actually come across the purse earlier and hadn't thought much of it, hadn't connected a stray purse in her own basement to the biggest missing persons case in the region. Burton Abbott himself had an answer ready. Back in May, he said, the basement had been used as a local polling place. Dozens of strangers in and out all day. Anyone could have left something behind. It was a plausible story. It just didn't explain the glasses, or the brassiere, or why, of everyone who could have wandered through that basement, the only physical trace of Stephanie Bryan on record led straight back to this address. Burton Abbott was 27 years old, a soft-spoken accounting student at the University of California, Berkeley, married with a young son. He didn't look like a suspect in a kidnapping and murder case. And he had, on paper, an alibi. He told police that on the day Stephanie disappeared, he'd been driving out to his family's weekend cabin nearly 300 miles away up in the Trinity Mountains. That detail would end up hanging him. Police searched the area around the cabin. In a shallow grave a few hundred feet from the property, they found a body badly decomposed after months in the ground. It was Stephanie Bryan. She had been beaten to death. There was no confession. There was no murder weapon with fingerprints. No witness who saw Burton Abbott anywhere near Stephanie Bryan. What there was a mountain of circumstantial detail and one piece of forensic evidence prosecutors leaned on hard that reportedly matched recovered from Abbott's car. Hair and Stephanie's hair and her clothing. Abbott was arrested and charged with kidnapping and first-degree murder. The trial, held in Oakland, became one of the most heavily covered court cases in California history. Front-page news almost every day for weeks. Alameda County District Attorney J. Frank Coakley told the jury Abbott was a sexual psychopath who'd left a trail of evidence, like a trail of corn, leading straight back to himself. The pathologist, notably, testified that Stephanie's body was too decomposed to determine whether she'd actually been sexually assaulted. But that didn't stop the prosecution from waving her recovered undergarments in front of the jury, building an emotional case, even where the physical evidence couldn't fully back it up. Abbott took the stand in his own defense and stayed there for 4 days. Witnesses described him as calm, soft-spoken, unshaken. He denied everything. He called the entire case against him a monstrous frame-up. The jury didn't move fast. They deliberated for close to 52 hours over 7 days before coming back with a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to death in California's gas chamber. Abbott's automatic appeal went to the California Supreme Court, which upheld both the conviction and the sentence. From there, the case moved toward its execution date at San Quentin and toward one of the strangest, most chaotic final hours in the history of American capital punishment. March 15th, 1957. Execution scheduled for 11 a.m. San Francisco Attorney George T. Davis was still fighting right up until the final hour, arguing that Abbott hadn't received a fair legal process, specifically that California had set his execution date 2 weeks before the 90-day federal window to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court had even closed. At 8:50 that morning, the U.S. Court of Appeals denied Davis's petition. He turned to California's governor, Goodwin Knight, but Knight was out at sea, inspecting a Navy aircraft carrier in San Francisco Bay, completely out of phone contact. Davis got a message relayed to the ship by Navy radio and arranged for a television station to broadcast a taped appeal directly to the governor. It worked. At 9:02, Knight called in by radio telephone and granted a 1-hour stay. Davis raced to file a writ of habeas corpus with the California Supreme Court. Denied at 10:42. He tried the Federal District Court. Denied again at 10:50, 10 minutes before the scheduled execution. With one option left, Davis got Governor Knight back on the line at 11:12 and secured a second stay. But at 11:15, Burton Abbott was already being led into the gas chamber. The order to stop had gone out, but not fast enough. The warden strapped him into the chair. At 11:18, the executioner pulled the lever. 16 pellets of sodium cyanide dropped into sulfuric acid beneath the seat. At that exact moment, on the other end of a phone line, Governor Knight's secretary was asking San Quentin's warden if the execution could still be stopped. The warden's answer, "No, sir, it's too late." Burton Abbott died as the governor hung up the phone. He was 29 years old. The case left a permanent mark on how California and the country. Thought about capital punishment built entirely on circumstantial evidence. There was no eyewitness, no confession, no weapon. Just a purse in a basement, some hair fibers in a car, and a jury convinced beyond reasonable doubt. And one person never accepted the verdict at all. Abbott's mother, Elsie. For the rest of her life, she lived to be 100 years old. She insisted her son was innocent, that he was too phasic tuberculosis and missing half a lung to have carried a body up a mountainside and buried it. She spent years afterward gathering what she believed was new evidence, presenting it to a grand jury that ultimately declined to reconsider the case. She even came to believe she knew who the real killer was. Her own brother, a truck driver she suspected of planting the evidence that sent her son to the gas chamber. Nobody ever reopened the case. Burton Abbott went to his death, still calmly insisting, as he had through 4 days on the witness stand, that he had nothing to do with it. That's the story of Stephanie Bryan, and the man executed for her murder on evidence that never included a single eyewitness. Just a purse in a basement, and 6 minutes that changed nothing. If you want more cases like this, the ones built entirely on circumstantial threads pulled, scribed to Faceless Storyteller, and turn on notifications, because Faceless Crimes runs a new case every week. And if you've got thoughts on whether the evidence against Burton Abbott held up, drop them in the comments. I read everyone. I'll see you in the next case.